Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Scotland and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, a good few different styles, but if people were to ask me about this brewery, I would say that they're probably best known for their different kinds of pale ales and IPAs, but they have been diversifying a little bit and doing a few different styles in recent times too, and those apparently are very nice, so we'll need to review those on the channel as time goes on. But the beer we're going to have a look at today is a style that I haven't tried from this brewery before, if memory serves me correctly. It's a style that I very much enjoy, and the beer itself is actually a member of their kind of core range, if we can call it that. So it's one that I've been really meaning to review for quite some time, but I just haven't got around to it. So it's something that we needed to correct on the channel, let's just say that. But I saw this one in one of my local beer shops and thought, let's get this done. So yeah, needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head over to Edinburgh, the Scottish capital. We're going to go to the southern part of the city, and we're going to have a look then at another beer from the wonderful Stewart Brewing. So this particular beer is called St Giles. It comes in at 5% ABV, and this one is a Scotch ale. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly where on the Scotch ale shilling scale this one is going to lie, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on when we actually taste the thing, and I'll tell you a wee bit about how you kind of measure these and stuff like that. But yeah, 5% Scotch ale, this one of Stewart Brewing's kind of more old school and longer standing beers actually. But yeah, the other one I really need to review from these guys is the Holyrood. I've never gotten around to that. But yeah, there are one or two others I think in that range that I need to have a wee look at. But my favourites from this brewery were always Capai, which was a West Coast New Zealand hopped IPA, and then also the First World Problems, which was a kind of Belgian IPA. Beautiful, beautiful beer that. But yes, St Giles is one that I've been meaning to try for a good wee while actually, and I do love a Scotch ale, so let's get this done. But yeah, anyways, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Stewart Brewing before, and we will no doubt add more to that list at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated. And remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beer from the area that you search for, they will pop up. And otherwise, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Scottish playlist along with many others, and you can of course check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Stewart Brewing once again then. So, Stewart Brewing, as I told you already, are based in the southern part of Edinburgh, and the company was founded by Steve Stewart along with his wife Jo. So Steve is a graduate of Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh, and he worked for several breweries including Base Brewery in both Ireland and Birmingham, and then also for the Harpoon Brewery over in Boston in Massachusetts in the US, and they're one of the, I think they were the producers of the first IPA in New England, if I'm not mistaken, in the modern era at least. But while working in Birmingham back in 1998, Steve built his first microbrewery with the help of his father-in-law, who owns a steel fabrication company. But Steve wanted to return to Scotland, and so he left his job with base in Birmingham to move to Edinburgh back in 2002. And at this point he started putting things in place to form his own microbrewery, and then production eventually began in January of 2004, with Steve having developed the trial brews in the microbrewery. But Steve worked very hard to secure a bigger production facility, and he eventually settled on a location in Bilston Glen Industrial Estate on the south side of Edinburgh. But while this site was being completed, Steve brewed his beers at the Strathaven Brewery to the south of Glasgow, and the first batch was produced at their own brewery in Edinburgh in late 2004. Over the following years, they kind of built up their sales portfolio and developed new recipes and things like this. but in 2010 they moved to a larger unit within the Bilston Glen Industrial Estate, and they're still based there today. But since foundation, this brewery have proved to be really quite successful. They've produced a number of special and seasonal beers in addition to their core range of beers, and further expansion of the brewery is also planned in the relatively near future. And a lot of that was put on hold because of the COVID pandemic, of course, but these days they're offering tours of the brewery, and they've got a tap room on site, and they also had another bar called Dockside Tap on Bernard Street in Leith, but this was closed as a result of the COVID pandemic. The bar at the brewery is open once again, and they're also serving pizza there from what I understand. But as of August 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 85 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and that number will no doubt continue to increase as time goes on. But yeah, I feel a little bit breathless after that. But yeah, that is your history of Stewart Brewing Company then. But if you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to see all the latest goings on and keep up to date with that. And you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, I think that's everything that we need to say about the brewery. So let's go on and actually have a little look at the beer itself. So as you can see, this one's one of the few beers I think that you'll find in bottle from Stewart Brewing still. Most of the stuff is canned these days, if I'm not mistaken. But you can see they've got the new sort of artwork and things on them, which is very nice. You can see the newer version of the Stewart Brewing symbol. That's also on the bottle cap here as well. 330ml bottle, this one. It says on the side here, just yet, Edinburgh's original craft brewery, Stewart Brewing have been innovating and brewing great beers since 2004. And it's yeah, the area, the name of the kind of town, if you like, or the district of Edinburgh that I was trying to remember was Loanhead. So yeah, it just says St Giles Scotch Ale, a robust backbone of Scottish malt, gives rise to distinct coffee, chocolate and nutty flavours. But yeah, 5% ABV, this one a Scotch Ale. For those of you who don't know, Scotch Ales tend to use what's known as the shilling scale. So before the pound was decimalised, you had shillings, so it's like a slash and a line. And when it came to Scotch Ales, you have a scale of these things. So you had 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 shilling, and you did also have 160s, which were the beasts. The idea was that the more malt you had in the beer, the more alcohol you would have, and thus you'd have to pay more tax on it. So yeah, 30 was at the bottom end and 90 was at the top. And most modern takes on the Scotch Ales, or wee heavies as the Americans tend to call them, where they're kind of based around the sort of 80, 90 shilling mark, and the big beasts of course are very similar to the 160 shillings. Some of the real classic examples in Scotland would be you know, Old Jock from Broughton Ales, anything pretty much from Tracker House, and then in more modern times you have the Old Parochial, the more American style Scotch Ale from Tempest Brewery down in Galashiels. St Giles, I'm not sure exactly how long this one has been around for, but I'm guessing it's been quite a wee while. I remember this beer when I was first kind of getting into craft beer, of course. But yeah, like I said, a 5% Scotch Ale, this one, 330ml bottle, named after the cathedral in the old town in Edinburgh, of course. But let's get this guy out into the glass and see what this one is all about. So, very curious about this. Not had something from Stewart in, I can't even remember, quite a wee while actually. So, there we are. No sediment at the bottom of the bottle in this one, but it should be quite nice, this beer. So anyway, you can see it's poured pretty much as you would expect of a kind of lower ABV Scotch Ale. If I remember rightly, the Old Jock is about 6.7% or something like that. So yeah, this one is pretty low. This is maybe going to be about a sort of 50, 60 shilling. We'll just need to see. But yeah, before the head disappears, you can see that this beer poured with about a 1/3 to a half finger of a frothy, I would say kind of fawn or ivory coloured head there. You can see there's some kind of medium-sized bubbles sitting on the top of the liquid, then some foamier ones sitting above that, and a few bumpy things just as you reach the very surface of the head. But overall, the colour of this beer is quite interesting. It's quite it's almost somewhere between like a very dark mahogany and a kind of chestnutty type colour. So this is really quite interesting. Yeah, this one. So remember, the colour of your beer basically depends on the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, length of your wort boil is going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts you put into the beer will also affect it as well. But yeah, the way this one goes together is pretty much as you'd expect. You don't have to. You do have to care a little bit about barrel aging, but you don't often add adjuncts into these beers. Into the Scotch ales, at least. You can add cherries and some red fruits and things like that, but that doesn't happen too often. But yeah, actually quite clear, this one. There's not really a natural haziness to this, so I think this one might well have been filtered, actually. But yeah, looks good in any case. But yeah, in terms of appearance, there's nothing untoward about this beer when you consider what style it is, and as I say, not too much in the way of visible carbonation. Yeah, interesting stuff. You can see that head has just given a very thin foamy layer. So yeah, good stuff. Let's have a wee look at the aroma then and see how we get on. I don't think we really need to say much more about the appearance of this beer. This is lovely, actually. It's really nice stuff, actually. Yeah, this is proper kind of Scottish brewed Scotch ale. I do like that. So for me, I've often talked about how I think you've got 2 types of Scotch ale. You've got the more American style ones, and then you've got the more traditional Scottish style ones. This one is interesting. It's maybe about 60. It's maybe about 75% traditional Scottish, but it has got a wee bit more kind of punch to it, like the American ones do. And I think that's a good balance to have, to be honest with you. And Stewart Brewing, we're always quite, their flavours, if people were to ask me about Stewart Brewing, I'd always say that their flavours are quite bright in their beer. They've always got a good little bit of sweetness out of the malt base, which I enjoy, then you've also got a nice big oily fruitiness, and that's one of the things that really drew me to Stewart Brewing when I was kind of getting into beer, and you can smell that out of this one as well. So it's quite interesting to go and try some of their really old school beers and see that is still there, because the ones that I started with, the Capai and the First World Problems, these are obviously recipes that came a bit later on. But I will say this smells really nice. It gives you everything you'd want from the style. You've got a lovely little bit of breadiness in there, you've got other little bits of woody and nutty character, you've got the brown sugars, you've got a little bit of hoppiness, and you've got a wee bit of red fruit. All things that you would expect from any beer in the shilling scale. But yeah, it's really nice. So, the backbone of the beer is, the backbone of this beer, we'll start there and we'll break it down as we always do. The backbone of this beer, you've got a lovely kind of very smooth, you've got a lovely little bit of a kind of drier, brown bready rye bread crust in there, which is great. So yeah, you can feel that just kind of forming the backbone of the beer. It is definitely like a kind of rye bready bread crust. There was a wee little touch of woodiness in there too. So yeah, dry rye bready bread crust, a little bit of woodiness. You've got rye bread on top of that. You do have like a little bit of a more kind of wholemeal brown bready character coming above that. Then there's a wee bit of nuttiness within that. I do get a very slight hint of peaty character out of this one. Very, very slight hint of like peaty and meaty note. I wouldn't be surprised if there's just a wee touch of smoke malt in this one. There's just something about it that's giving me a wee bit of a smoky, peaty character. But as I say, it's quite minimal compared to other things. It's mostly like a kind of rye bready and wholemeal brown bready character. A bit of woodiness, bit of kind of nuttiness. Then yeah, you've got all these, as I say, you've got all of these sort of brown sugary notes sitting above that. So you've got a good little bit of a kind of toasty brown sugar in the base. A little bit of a sweet, there is a wee touch of a sweeter caramel in there. Yeah, mainly sweet caramel, toasty brown sugar, I would say. And there's And this beer isn't quite strong enough to have the, the more leathery notes and the kind of treacle molasses sort of things. This one, it's quite, as I say, it's quite straightforward, but I mean at 5% ABV, it's got everything you'd kind of expect, but it's certainly not, a big, if this beer, I think just with the aroma of this, I think they've got it pretty bang on, but for me, I always like these beers to just be that little bit stronger. I like the big, malty, brown, sugary buggers, and this one is that, but it's just like a kind of, it's just a little bit of a kind of toned down version, if you like. So, but the aroma of this is really nice. I'd be very curious to see, or to see them do like a stronger version, this like a 160 shilling version, because I think the recipe of this, I think, is going to be really spot on in terms of its flavour. But yeah, the aroma of this, I think, is great. Interesting stuff. Yeah, and like really nice actually on that malt basis. As I say, just very authentic, and the sort of dryness you get out of this one, as I say, it's like 70% sort of Scottish, traditional Scottish Scotch ale, and about 25% more kind of bold American style Scotch ale. But yeah, that malty backbone is really nice. The hoppy side of the beer is kind of what you'd expect, and Scotch ales, of course, are not the most hop forward of styles. But you get a little bit of earthiness out of this one, quite a smooth earthiness. There's a little touch of herbal character in there as well. So yeah, a little bit of earthiness, a little bit of herbal character. And then as you move further forward from that, you've got a really nice little bit of floral aromaticity coming out of the beer. So yeah, I think it's English hops that are in this one, just going from the way that it goes together. The earthiness and the slightly herbal character you get out of it strikes me as being more English. You've got a little bit of a kind of zesty, grassy character on the front of the nose too, which is really nice. And then yeah, you also have this the fruity notes coming out of the beer, which I also think are very good. So for me, there's a little bit of a kind of, I don't know if raisins is quite right for it, but you've definitely got a little bit of an oily plum, big kind of figgy character in there, and also a good little bit of a kind of blackcurranty, blackberry sort of note coming out of it. So yeah, I think the way this beer goes together in that sense is really quite nice. So it's a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, it gives you, as I say, aroma wise, it gives you everything that you'd expect of the style. Yeah, good stuff though. Really nice aroma, and I have to say I'm just really curious to try this now. As you'll know if you've watched the channel for any length of time, I love a good Scotch ale, but I think yeah, we should give this a go and see what it's all about. So yeah, take a bit of time to enjoy that aroma. But this one is the St Giles, a 5% Scotch ale from the wonderful Stewart Brewing in Loanhead, Bilston Glen Industrial Estate to the south of Edinburgh. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I mean, for me, this one is really quite, it's a lot dry. I'll say that. The impact flavour of this is quite a little bit drier than I thought it was going to be. More roasty and toasty on the bread crust too. I wasn't quite expecting that. I thought this was going to be a little bit more sweet and things, but still, interesting. Really interesting. This a bit more old school actually. From actually tasting this one, the aroma would have you believe it's maybe, 75% old school, 25% American. I think that's what I said, but yeah, it's more. It really leans even more toward the kind of old school, traditional Scottish Scotch ales. So yeah, the way this goes together is really quite nice. For me, it's be interesting to try this on cask as well and just see it with the slightly smoother mouthfeel. Of course, when you bottle condition something, it's going to be a bit wetter and a bit more crisp and stuff like that. And I think that's kind of promoting some of the kind of more toasty elements out of this beer, but yeah, it works really quite well. Yeah, I like that. So let's just try it. I'm just enjoying the kind of dryness that this beer has. But let's do as we always do. We'll break the beer down and describe the flavour a wee bit more in depth for you. We'll start with the middle third of the palate then. The backbone of the beer, you have that lovely kind of fresh, you have that lovely kind of sort of fresh, roasty, toasty, like well-fired morning roll type thing there. So that forms the backbone of the middle third of your palate for sure. As you move further forward, on that middle third of your palate, you have a wee bit more of a kind of woody character coming out of this one. So yeah, a little bit more of a kind of woody character in there. A wee bit of a base. Yeah, it is a little bit of a kind of dry, almost oaky type note there. But yeah, well-fired morning roll, a little bit of an oaky character in there. On top of that, you start to get the more rye bready note out of the beer. So yeah, well-fired bread crust, more of a kind of rye bready note sitting on top of it. And the rye bread has a little bit of an almost kind of caramelised brown sugary note to it, which I find really interesting. There's a wee bit more woody character in there, but then above that you get the wholemeal sort of brown bready note coming out of this one. And the wholemeal brown bread's got a little bit of density to it and a little bit more of a kind of grainy character, which I think is nice. So yeah, a little bit more of a kind of grainy wholemeal brown bready note in there, a little bit of nuttiness, which comes out further into the aftertaste, of course, and some of the woodiness is there as well. So yeah, kind of more dense wholemeal brown bready character, a little bit of woodiness in there, as I say, and then above that you have the kind of brown sugars. So yeah, I like that. So the brown sugary character in this one is really interesting because it's got a few layers to it again. So you have a wee bit of this kind of more toasty brown sugary character in there. That forms the backbone of it. It's toasty and it's a bit dry, but it's also kind of sweet. And then above that, you have got a slightly leathery kind of note to this one. But it's not big and leathery in the way that some of these, high ABV Scotch ales are going to be. So it's just a wee bit, it's kind of roasty and toasty on the edge, and then in the middle you've got a circle of like a more leathery brown sugar, and then above that you start to get the more oily kind of, you do start to get the more oily, you start to get these more kind of oily, sweeter brown sugars out of it actually. So in the dead centre of your palate you've got a nice oily, sweet caramelly note in this one. Then you get a little bit of a more biscuity character out of the beer when you move out toward the edges of the palate there. So yeah, it's kind of, you've got a layer there, roasty, then a more leathery layer on top of it, the more oily caramel sitting in the dead centre of your palate on top, and then a wee touch of more biscuity character sitting above that as you move out toward the edges of your palate there. It's really nice. It is really very nice. So, yeah, the way that this beer goes together in that particular regard is really quite nice. The malty backbone in that middle 30 pack has got quite a little bit of complexity to it as well, but it is a lot more roasty and toasty than I was expecting it to be. It has got that real, well-fired morning bread roll type quality to it. So yeah, interesting stuff. I think that covers everything we need to say about the middle third of your palate then. So let's have a wee look at the back third of your palate. So remember the general trend with your palate, that sweeter flavours will come out further forward, more dry and bitter flavours will come out further back. So that's what you're kind of getting in this beer as well. So the back third of your palate then, you're going to get similar flavours to the middle third of your palate, just at different intensities. So that border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of bready build up in there. It's basically the kind of rye bread in the base and the more wholemeal brown bready character above that. But then, yeah, the base of the back third of your palate, you've got the more roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust in there, which is even drier. You've got a little bit of a more almost kind of I like a bit of a more rye bready bread crust sitting above that. Then you get the kind of rye bready layer, which feels a little bit lighter and more airy for sure. Then the wholemeal brown bready layer sits above that, which again is a bit light and airy. And yeah, above that you start to get, you can feel some of the more dry, roasty brown sugars. Just just going above that too. And that kind of creeps on top of that back third of the palate. But as I say, I do like how that pieces together in this one. That gets a thumbs up from me. Yeah. On top of everything else on that back third of the palate, you start to get some of the yeastiness out of the beer. And this one, it's quite hard to detect the yeastiness in it because of how kind of roasty and toasty it is. I think this one, the yeasty character you get is this kind of dry, wholemeal brown bready character in there. So yeah, you've got that dry, yeasty kind of wholemeal brown bready character. It's got a little bit of a crackery and woody note to it, and it's kind of wrapped in this sort of toasty. It's wrapped in this kind of toasty. It's wrapped in this kind of toasty. It's like well-fired brown sugar. It's kind of like that, and that sits above everything else on the back third of the palate. So you can definitely feel that the flavour of this beer that is taller on the back third of your palate. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. And yeah, I think that goes together really quite nicely. But I think that's everything we need to say about the malty yeasty side of the beer. So let's have a wee look at the hoppy side of things then. So the back corners of your palate, you've got a lovely little bit of a kind of stronger earthy character in there. As you move further forward, it does get a little bit more herbal, but as you push toward the front corners of your palate, you get that earthy note in there, you get the little bit more herbal character. It does feel a bit English, but at the same time it's a bit more powerful. But as you push toward the front corners of your palate, you start to get a little bit more of a floral aromaticity. And the floral aromaticity does make me wonder if there's an American hop in here too. But round the front curve of your palate, you definitely get a bit of a lighter grassiness in there, and it has got a wee touch of kind of zestiness to it, which I do quite like. So, for me, the green component's nice. It just has a bit more depth to the beer. On the fruity side of things, then it's great. You've got that border region between, or the front third of your palate, I should say. You get the fruity side of things. So on that border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of a kind of bready build up in there. You do have a little bit of rye bread in the base, and a bit of a more wholemeal brown bready character on top of that. The base of that front third of your palate, you've got the toasty, well-fired bread roll, as you'd expect, but feels a little bit lighter. The rye bready characters in there, and it feels a little bit more sweeter, and then you get that nice kind of oily bubble where the juicy, fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. So let's have a little look at that, actually. So, the fruity side of the beer is quite nice in this one, I have to say. At the back of that front third of your palate, you get a very slight hint of like plum. I would say it's definitely not raisin, it's not quite sharp enough to be raisin, so more of a slight juicy plum, maybe a little bit of prune. As you move further forward, there's a little bit of an oily fig in the very middle of that front third of your palate. Then I'm getting a more oily kind of peary character, and as you move into the kind of front half of that front third of your palate, there's a little bit of like a black currant underneath, and then a bit more of a kind of oily blackberry. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together, I think, is really quite nice. The fruity side of things, it's not quite as oily and kind of big and fruity as I thought it was going to be, but still, this beer has been a wee bit of a surprise. This one has, the flavour profile has deviated a wee bit from what I expected of it from the aroma, but still, nice beer, this one. I would like to try this on tap at some point, but I don't know if this one's widely produced for like cask or keg or anything like that, so need to look into that a wee bit, but still, it would be interesting to try this one with the more kind of cask or keg mouthfeel to it. But yeah, I think we can round off the review then with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So for me, the mouthfeel of this beer, it's kind of I'd say it's kind of right in the middle of the spectrum. It's mid-bodied. The carbonation is very, very smooth. It's really nice and clean. And I would say that it is, yeah, in terms of mouthfeel, it is quite light and quite clean for a Scotch ale. You maybe want it to just be that little bit thicker and that little bit more kind of smoothing things. The thing that was interesting about this one I noticed is that in the malt base it says that it contains wheat and oats. And I would have expected it just to have a wee bit of a thicker mouthfeel on that basis. But like I said, at 5% ABV, it's quite light for a kind of wee heavy Scotch ale sort of thing. So it's near the bottom end of the Scotch ale scale, if you like, so sort of 50 shilling or something like that. So yeah, the way all of that goes together is quite interesting. But yeah, it is definitely in that. I would say I'd be curious to see them take this recipe and take it up to sort of 7-8% and see how it goes. Just get a wee bit more brown sugar and a wee bit more kind of thickness and things out of it. That would be a really interesting thing to do with this beer. But like I say, this is one of their more old school recipes, and I can understand what they're doing with this. This is a beer that's from the kind of mid 2000s, if you like. So the flavours we're getting out of this beer kind of makes sense for the era. Rather than it being one of the more modern and bold beers. So I get where we're going with this. But overall, I'd say that the beer does have a little bit of bitterness to it. I think we're talking about 40 or 50-ish IBUs from the perception side of things. I don't know what the calculated bitterness of it would be, but there's bitterness from the malt and a wee bit from the hops, and I do like that. The malt base has got roastiness underneath, breadiness in the middle, and then some sweetness on top. And as I say, you've got that hoppy bitterness there, the earthiness, the floral note, and the wee bit of grassiness. The malt base, it gives you a bit of a dry sweetness into the aftertaste. Then you've just got that little bit of light fruitiness toward the end of it, and these are all things that you would expect of the Scotch ale, of course. But yeah, I think we've said everything we need to about this beer, to be honest with you. This has been really interesting to try. So yeah, I think we can leave it there. This one was the St Giles, a 5% Scotch ale from Stewart Brewery in Loanhead in the south side of Edinburgh, the Bilston Glen Industrial Estate. One of the more old school beers from these guys that I've been meaning to review for a good wee while. So we'll need to see the next time I'm home about getting the Hollywood Pale on the channel and having a little look at that. But yeah, let's leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Stewart Brewing as well, and we will see about returning to these guys again quite soon. Do something a little bit more modern and experimental from them, because they have been doing that, and we'll have a little look at a few of their older beers when we get the chance to. But thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out Stewart Brewing's social media, and I'll see you soon. Slàinte, skål, and cheers.